Breaking the gray.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Russ. Nice to see you again.
You too. It's been a long time since we talked. A long time. We've avoided, I think, most of our technical issues, which is fun. We're almost perfect now at having at least one, and then getting there. We've had a couple that actually went smoothly, which I was a little upset about. But
Yeah, it's better to get them all out of the way at the start.
it is. So, Sarah, we are on this long journey of longevity, understanding what we can do to keep this old face looking younger and feeling younger. You don't look this way. I do. I wear the weight of the 100 years. You look the age of your intrinsic age, which is about 35.
37.
37. I'm taking years off and adding more to mine. I'm now 62. But something's buzzing in my ear. Is that me? Okay. I was like, I think there's a bumblebee in our studios. Our 3 studios. Okay, so Sarah, we have a wonderful guest today. Let's introduce our guest and get started because we have a lot to talk about.
Yes, thank you. I'm so pleased to introduce Hope from Hope and Wholesome. I had the pleasure of being on her podcast recently. But thank you so much for coming on, Hope. It's really lovely to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with y'all today.
Yeah, me too. I think we've had a lot of interviews lately where we've kind of gone into a lot of the science, and we've been talking very granularly about specific supplements or one very specific nutrient. So it would be nice this week, I think, to kind of open it up a little bit and have a little discussion which is a bit more holistic, which is lucky because I know that's your thing. And I know Russ is very keen on the kind of the energetics and that side of things, which
yes,
I sometimes have resistance to, but I think you're going to talk about it in a way that kind of keep us both happy.
Yeah.
So please give a little bit of introduction about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, which essentially means I use functional labs to help get to the root cause of chronic symptoms and chronic issues and chronic disease. I'm also a holistic nutritionist, and I'm a Reiki practitioner. I'm a human design guide. I have a brick and mortar Pilates and fitness studio, a podcast. So I just like to dabble in all the things.
Yeah, but great. And I've seen your fabulous Instagram. You have quite a comprehensive gym that you've got going on there. And every now and then you come up on my feed and I think, oh my goodness, what is she doing today? So maybe you can kind of explain a little bit about that, because it doesn't look like normal fitness routines that you're doing there.
Yeah, so my studio is Pilates based. So it's based on the Pilates principles, which is really all about control, and it's about the core, and it's about isolating certain muscle groups, and it's really for more functional movement. So a lot of people get confused, or they don't know the difference between yoga and Pilates, and they kind of lump them all in the same thing. And while they both have they both complement each other well, and there's benefits to both, they are very different. And so at my studio, we have classes on like the Pilates equipment that is kind of universal, right? Pilates was created by a man, Joseph Pilates, and it really was about functional movement, and contrology was what it was originally called. But that's kind of my approach to everything. It's just, as me as an FDNP fits really well because I'm all about functionality, like functional movement and functional nutrition and, functional means of healing the body. And so it all just fits well because it's really just about moving for, speaking of longevity, and that's kind of what y'all have been talking about. It really is moving for longevity. And it's really why I love Pilates so much is it really, as cliche, I feel like it sounds cliche because I just say it all the time, but it really is for everybody, no matter your level, your skill level, your fitness level, your age. We've had clients, up in their 80s that are doing this daily. And that's why they've been able to do it daily, is because it's been something they've been able to continuously do as they've aged. And it just works.
Yeah. We've had a few guests on that have told us, if you could just squat and go down and get back up, then you're pretty healthy. And I could do that, but Pilates is a different story. Like, I've come home and been like, there are muscles in my legs that hurt that I've never used before.
Totally.
So how important is flexibility, and how important is it to remain flexible in your life?
Yeah. I think honestly, I think, and this is something that, Joseph Pilates and a lot of his kind of original students taught about, was kind of what is the fountain of youth. And like for one of them, Ron Fletcher, I did a comprehensive training through that program. His was the feet. It's flexibility of the feet, and it's like the foundation of your body. And he was all about the footwork and how flexible can we get our feet. For Joseph Pilates, it was all about the spine. It was keeping the spine mobile and stable. And that's kind of, it's literally like the center of your body. It's the axis that everything moves off of. So, flexibility just in general, that is the key for me. That is the key to longevity. My dad passed away about 5 years ago from muscular dystrophy, and watching that decline, it had never been more evident to me, the importance of flexibility. That's the first thing to go, it's the flexibility in his hands and his feet and his knees and, the joints, and just watching that and see how, not even with anything else happening, just that loss of flexibility, how much the body just atrophies, right? Regardless of him having a neuromuscular, degenerative disease, but just that loss of flexibility and how it affects how you can move and function and get around. I really do think it all stems from that flexibility. It's flexibility and stability. I think it's both of those together.
Yeah. People seem to be coming around from it more going away from like the gym where you're doing repetitive exercise to this more functional movement. Well, certainly in the biohacker world, I don't know how much that actually is filtering out into like normal gyms and things, whether people are still just working away at those running machines or not. But in my world, certainly people are a lot more about functional movements, lifting things, throwing things.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. I see it too. And I think we have more and more, at least in my, again, sometimes I feel like I live in a bubble too, but I think in my world too, I see the same thing. People coming to my studios where, they've done other things, and they've done the, kind of CrossFit things. And they've done these hardcore boot camp things, and they've really just torn up their bodies doing these things that maybe weren't as functional as they thought they were. And they're coming into my studios like, okay, I want something that's going to help me, maintain muscle and flexibility and all that, but I also want something that's going to be a little kinder to my body, as I age. I do think people are looking at it a little bit differently now.
Yeah, I will say that this year, as Sarah and I have been kind of experimenting with new things, I did go a little hardcore on HIIT, and I found that I threw my back out immediately. I threw my back out, and obviously I know what you're going to say. I have a core issue, even though you can't see my core. I do have a core issue, many core issues. That's one, my core, but like that. Keeping your core strength, like the philosophy of Pilates. Let's talk about that a little bit. Is it in your core? Like, is it keeping your core strong? Where does the flexibility start? Because that's, if I'm to start, I don't want to throw my back out again. Where would it be?
Yeah, totally. It's the core. And I think at the crux of that is that people really don't know what their core is. They think their core is just their abs, but your core is literally from your shoulders down to your pelvis, right? So it's all of that. So I think a big thing, what I see, we have, men, women, kids, we have all ages and genders and all that come in. And it really, for me, for the most part, it all comes down to the core, but specifically talking about like pelvic lumbar stability and pelvic lumbar, like how to strengthen and move that in the right direction. And it's posterior chain. I had a guest on my show a few weeks ago, and we were talking about that. He's like a pain management guy, and he has this method that he uses, not a doctor, but he has this method to help people with pain. And we were talking about that people really underestimate, like when people, like you're talking about your back, for example, like people really underestimate, or not, maybe underestimate is not the word. I think they misunderstand like where the pain comes from, right? Like that's usually the source of the pain, or where the pain is located isn't really the source, right? It's like misdirected. And for the most part, it comes down to your core, but specifically, it's not really all about the abs. And again, I think most people look at it that way. Like, I just want to do a million crunches and planks and all that, which, that's fine, but it's not really working the entire core. And so it's the posterior chain, right? It's the glutes, it's the hamstrings, but it's also that pelvic lumbar stability and being able to build strength around all those muscles around the pelvis, which connects to your back, your spine, and all the rest of your body. It's that center part there.
If only your spine could have a six-pack, then people would be focusing so much more on how my core looked. If it was my entire spine, I'd be like, check out my spine.
Right.
So that I totally understand that, and I think I broke my back about 10 years ago, and I never really recovered from it. I was the newspaper article said 40-year-old man tossed by wave, so you can only imagine how tragic the accident was.
Oh
I
my
was
gosh.
in the ocean washing off my feet, washing off sand, and I just thought I'd catch a wave back in, but the wave was shore break. And it was embarrassing because my wife was watching me and she was like, did that wave really just throw you on your head? But I never really recovered, and I just feel like my neck and spine are the areas where I've just been really hesitant to do anything because of the potential pain there. But it does sound like that's an area I probably have to spend some time on. If that's where my core goes, then do that.
That's
Okay.
it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then I have a weak neck. Sometimes my head bobbles and I have to like bring it back because I don't strengthen my neck. I don't, Sarah. I don't. I just have this bobbling big head.
Well, as you said, I think it's doing it, but going for the long-term goal, isn't it? Because, people have these short-term goals of weight loss or six packs or whatever, whereas this is kind of more of a plan for healthy longevity.
Yeah. And I think like to your point, Rez, I think people do get caught up in like the aesthetics of it all. And I mean, I've been guilty of the same, right? We want to have the six pack or the ripped arms or whatever. But when it comes down to longevity, like it's not about the aesthetics. It's like, can I move? Can I do things? Can I stay active? Can I, play with my kids or my grandkids or whatever? Like there's just much more to it than just the aesthetics.
Yeah. And Sarah, Hope, you are a very well-rounded biohacker / everything. If you were to rank what's next, so flexibility is there, and at the end we'll ask you to kind of rank them all together. But so what's next? Like if you focus on flexibility, you mentioned Reiki. I see a lot of talk about the right diet. What do you focus on next? Like if you were to say, okay, fine, you've got a great spine, Russ and Sarah. Now let's focus on the next thing. What is the next thing for you that you would really put attention to?
Well, in my functional practice, where we start is with mineral balancing. That's the part for me that a lot of people miss. And I did additional certifications and programs and all that to really hone in on this piece because I really do see it as a missing link in the chain here, because I know y'all probably talked about this for minerals, and you've heard, probably people listening probably heard, are considered the spark plugs in the body, right? And when we think about what that really means, like literally nothing can happen in the body without minerals. Like even the vitamins are in your body, the precursor to those vitamins are the minerals. Like the minerals have to cause those reactions to happen to create the vitamins. Every enzymatic reaction, every hormonal, everything in your body starts from the minerals. And we're looking at the hormones, we're looking at the gut or whatever. Like women come to me all the time, like, just I need to fix my hormones. Like their hormones are never the problem. Like it's just another symptom, right, of what's going on. What exercise do I need to do? No, it's not about that. Like it really starts at a cellular level. It starts with the minerals. And so that's where I start in my functional practice, is literally looking at the cellular level, what's going on with your minerals and the mineral balance.
What do you do then? You take a blood test?
I do an HTMA, which is a hair tissue and mineral analysis, and you're literally sending in some of your hair. So this is where it gets a little tricky, because, you can go to the doctor, right? And go to the doctor and they can do a blood panel for your minerals. But the problem, and really this is, I believe this is true for just about any blood test, right? The blood test it's a blip in time, right? It's what's going on like right now. It's a very acute look at what's going on in the body, whether you're measuring minerals or hormones or whatever. But with minerals especially, minerals are, a lot of them are intracellular. So when you're looking at the blood, it's really not an accurate picture of what's going on in the body. And it's not accurate at all at looking at what's going on chronically. So we really want a good picture of what's going on with your mineral levels. You want to look at what's going on over a long period of time. So with the HTMA, you're sending in your hair is a tissue. It's what's going on over the past like 3 or 4 months. So it's a much more accurate look at what's going on chronically at a cellular level. And it's just more accurate in my opinion.
Great. And what do you tend to find trends, with people, like the aging population is lacking a certain mineral, or maybe different populations, maybe in your different areas? What are your findings?
Yeah. I think there are some trends I find. So a lot of women who come to me there's a lot of like thyroid and adrenal stuff going on. And a lot of that is kind of like the root cause of what's going with their hormones, right? They want to know, why are my hormones out of whack and why is this happening? And the HTMA measures a couple dozen different minerals, but we hone in first on the big four, those macro minerals, right? So it's sodium, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. And that's really where we look. And so the biggest trends, I would say, would probably be with those four, because the other ones can kind of fluctuate depending on what these four are doing. These four really affect what a lot of the other ones are doing, because there's also relationships between them. And I think that's where mineral balancing can get tricky. And why I love the HTMA is because we can assume that we're deficient in this or that or whatever, and then we start to take more of this one, but then now we're actually knocking this one out of whack because too much of this one is going to be antagonizing. It can be a little complex. So with HTMA, we can really get accurate with it. And those big four, looking at the big four, I see is really where the most trends show up. And with potassium, for example, especially in women, and I honestly don't run a whole lot on men just because I work mostly with women, but from what I see in my practice, potassium is historically very low in the majority of the population. And really, if you think about it, I think that the RDA is like 4,500 milligrams. That's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot of potassium, and most of us just aren't getting enough. And then when, our adrenals are working overworked and then our thyroid is sluggish, like it's just going to burn through the supplies anyway. So potassium is typically something I see that's pretty low in just about everybody. Sodium is another one. I could talk about sodium all day long. Sodium is another one that gets tricky because, at least here in the States, right, we've been taught forever that sodium is what causes high blood pressure and strokes, and eat a low sodium diet, watch your sodium intake. And, it's causing all these things. And when the problem with sodium, again, I'm speaking for the States here. I can't speak for everywhere else, but for the problem with sodium is Americans, I would probably say the Western world, we don't have a sodium intake problem. It's a sodium retention problem because it's where we're getting the sodium from.
When you talk about sodium levels and you've addressed it, let's say someone comes in with low sodium, is it really about finding the right kind of sodium, and what is that?
Yeah, really it is. And so I would say if you're listening to this and you have any table salt in your house, just throw it away. Like nobody needs to be eating table salt, first of all. And yeah, it really is just finding the right kind of salt. And so it's getting an unrefined sea salt. The Celtic salt, what I had mentioned before, what I always recommend. It's the highest in trace minerals and it's the most hydrating. But there's other versions. Like one of my clients is like, what about black lava salt? I'm like, that sounds really fancy. I'm sure it's really good. So as long as it's unrefined, the unrefined versions, again, if you think about like what white sugar is, it's, everything's been stripped away. It's the same with table salt, with just the plain table salt. So the unrefined salt and getting rid of, the table salt and just being mindful of your intake of processed foods that have salt, just, salt versus sea salt in the ingredients.
Yeah, I know. We had a guest on the other day that mentioned something about having anything that had more than 5 ingredients, you shouldn't eat that.
Good rule.
And I'm curious about that though, because I think when you're making your eating selection, I just want to get something fast. Rarely do I have more than 30 minutes to prepare a meal for myself. But would you suggest actually getting prepared and preparing meals? Like how would you really look at like meal planning here? Because I do think that like when it comes to looking at levels, I imagine that some of the commonality comes back to getting that balance back into your diet as well.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, prepared whole meals with whole foods is always the goal. And I understand too. And I work with a lot of women who are business owners and they work in the corporate world, they're entrepreneurs, like they're busy and people have families that get set, like I get it. And so it does require some planning, but I think the other thing too, is you can still be smart about it. Like I have clients who, they use the like the meal kit boxes, like right. You can find, exactly. Yeah. And you can find healthy ways to still, save on time, but still you're eating those healthful whole foods.
Yeah. My wife does not eat. And it's like she works 12 hours a day. She comes downstairs and she will not eat because she's so exhausted and she does not have time to prepare a meal. So I will make dinner. I don't make dinner all the time. We'll order DoorDash, but it is a problem. Like her job is primary and she wants it that way, and that's great. but it does impact what she puts in her body, and I do worry about that, because I want her to, feel healthy and be healthy as well. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it really is just all about it's just finding what works for you in terms of like, the time factor. And I get it. And I have clients like that too, and I'm like, okay, I'd rather you're doing, Green Chef or, whatever the other, whatever the other ones go, those meal preparing stuff, whatever it is, or you're doing DoorDash from, a place that's serving, healthful whole food, but just finding what works for you and just getting those whole foods as much as possible versus like not eating. Because I know that happens a lot with my clients too. It's like, well, I'm too tired, or it's 9 p.m. and I just want to go to bed. Like, yeah, you just kind of have to find what works for you.
I should make dinner more often. I really should. It should be on me to do that too. And if she listens to this, which she does not listen to the podcast, but if she did, she would understand that I need to do more to make dinner for our family. So diet, we're balancing our minerals. Should we talk a little bit about energy and Reiki? Because I'm fascinated with it, and we've talked to another Reiki master last season, but I'm curious your thoughts on it and your approach on it.
Yeah, I love talking about this. I could talk about this all day. So I am in the camp, I believe every physical ailment in our body has some emotional or energetic root source. I think it all starts in the energy body, whether that's, trauma that's been stored, some emotions that haven't been processed. That's where it all starts. And so that's the reason that I incorporate that into my practice. And again, the premise of everything that I do is getting to the root cause. And yes, there are physical root causes, but those physical root causes, it's deeper than that. And for me, that's what the Reiki is. And I kind of incorporate, so I have kind of my own version of Reiki sessions. I call them emotional release sessions. And so it's kind of a combination of Reiki and some ancient practices of kind of processing emotions. If you're familiar with the emotion codes, I kind of put all of that into a session. And it's really identifying, kind of getting into this meditative state, identifying where is the stored emotion. And we just do one at a time, right? Where's the stored emotion? What part of the body am I holding on to it? Where did it come from? We kind of work through that process down. And then I use the Reiki, at the end of the session to kind of clear things out and kind of work through that. But every time I have a session with a client, something always comes up. I had a client a few weeks ago. We did a session, and, I'm asking her, she's trying to figure out where the emotion is that's stored. And so she said, this is very specific. This is the most specific one I've had this far, but she says, my left ovary. She specifically said my left ovary, like this is where it's happening. So, she's getting emotional and she's kind of crying through the session, and she's feeling this, these emotions, and shame was a big one that was coming up for her. And I don't ask a whole lot of questions during it. Like I let whatever comes up. If they want to share details, they can share details. We don't have to. 2 days later, she sends me a message, and she's in the hospital from a ruptured cyst in her left ovary. So when I say she released something massive. So it never fails that there's something happens when we release things from the energetic body. Something happens in our physical body. And that's really, it just all goes back to getting to the root cause.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just wondering if we could just do a little bit now, because I think it is important, but it's different to hear someone to actually trying to do it for yourself. And I wondered if you could just take us through it, because I'm interested to know how you kind of tap into the energy body. Maybe we can feel something now.
Yeah. I'm going to do a little short release.
You want to do it, Russ?
Yeah, you do it.
No, you do it.
We'll both do it. Can you do both? Can we both of us do it?
You can both do it. You can both do it.
We can both do it. Come on,
my
Russ.
father was
Russ
mean
doesn't
to
want to
me,
know
that's
what's
why
going on.
Doesn't
want to cry on air. That would be the first.
No, I have not cried on this podcast. I've cried on another podcast. Not on this
You can cry. Let it out.
I have a podcast I did for something just recently, and I cried, and Sarah and I had a guest who cried, and I was like, oh my gosh, that would be so embarrassing if I cried. And I literally was talking about something and started crying, and the host was like, are you okay? And I couldn't talk because I was like blubbering. It was so ridiculous. Okay. I promise not to cry.
It's okay if you do. And I'll just keep it short. I'll just kind of do the first part where we kind of identify it and talk through it. I'll just keep it short. So at least you can kind of get the gist of it. So, okay, if you're listening, Maybe if you're driving, don't do this while you're driving. But if you get to a place you're not driving, y'all can close your eyes. So, I would take longer than this to kind of get into the state, right? But we'll just, for time's sake, we'll just kind of keep it brief. So getting into that meditative state. So go ahead and close your eyes. And as much as you can, wherever you're listening to this, if you can just kind of tune into your body. And so here is kind of the key when we work through this session is tuning into our body. We have a tendency to kind of tune out the body, right? We push the signals aside, we push the signs that it's giving us, we tune it out, we don't have time to listen to it. And the big piece here is being able to, I don't want to say turn off the mind, because the mind doesn't turn off, but if we can kind of quiet the mind and really tune into the body has the answers. The body has all the answers. You've ever read the book, The Body Keeps the Score? The body has all the answers. And so in this session, we're going to tune into our inner voice, that inner guide, that inner, however you want to call it, your inner self, higher self, inner guide, inner voice, whatever word resonates for you. But it's that still quiet voice that pushes you in the right direction, and we take the time to listen to it. And this is the voice that has the answers. So when we're kind of getting into this space, just using your breath, letting your breath kind of guide you into that space where we can kind of quiet the mind, tune into the body. And let's just do kind of a body scan here, kind of tuning into what you're feeling in your body. If you're feeling any source of tension, if there's any contractions, pain, discomfort, anything that's coming up in the body. And let's see if you can just kind of, so when we're tuning in here, when we really tune into the body, we can figure out where the discomfort is coming, where their sense of contraction, and then bring your attention to that space. Yes. Feel into where that is, and then keep your attention. So feel into where that is. Maybe it's in the belly.
How did you know?
Maybe it's in the chest, the shoulder, the neck. Look again there. So I'm going to hold your attention where you feel that discomfort, the pain, the contraction. Maybe it's a twisting, a pulling, whatever sensation you're feeling. And then see if you can give it a shape. Right? Maybe it's a rock, a backpack. One of my clients saw it, a nail. It's very specific. A school bus, an orange, whatever shape it is, give it a shape. And then as you hold your attention there, so the more we can tune the mind out and really tune into the body, the more it's going to give us the answers here. But whatever shape that you see, let's see if we can give it a name and find out what exactly that emotion is that's stuck there. Maybe it's anger, resentment, shame, guilt, fear. Fear is a pretty popular one that gets stuck. Maybe it's anxiety, overwhelm. So give it a name.
Should
If
we
you
say
want
it out
to,
loud?
share it.
Just because we feel so badly that you're talking, and we
Yeah.
we want to.
I usually do have my
join in.
clients share if you're willing to share. If you don't want to share, you don't have to. Sarah doesn't want to.
I'm
No,
happy to
fine.
share. Yeah, Sarah,
Yeah.
can you start?
Well, yeah. Well, it's my jaw that I didn't realize I was clamping shut so much, and actually, it's quite difficult. Every time I relax it and then try and focus on something else, I realize it's clamping again, and my eyes actually. But the emotion is something, not like maybe like anger or frustration. It's one of those kinds of emotions. Yeah, so that's, I don't know, it feels like a blue, like a clip, holding my mouth shut. That's how I
visual.
feel.
Yeah.
Come on, Russ, yours is going to be something well bizarre. Let's hear what Russ is going
Mine is the shape of a
love it.
grapefruit in my
Yeah.
stomach. In my stomach. And I think it's that I feel this really strange feeling of an overwhelming underwhelm. Like I'm really annoyed that I am at a passive state right now. I want to feel inspired, and I've been bothered by it for a month or so where I'm not feeling the same inspired energy that I
Mm-hmm.
had in the past, and I can't seem to tap back into it. And maybe it's burnout, but I really am feeling upset and angry about the fact that I'm not inspired
So
or doing the same level of
that is
work. So
interesting you say that. So you're saying a grapefruit in your stomach. So around your stomach is where the sacral center is, and your sacral center is the center for creativity and life force and all of that. So this is all, it's all connecting. And that's kind of what we would do throughout the rest of the session, right? I would kind of make some connections where we're feeling the things and what's happening there. We would kind of talk through, we kind of go deeper into, where did this come from and when did it start and how old is it, that kind of thing. And we kind of use the Reiki session to, again, kind of figure out, we've worked through where kind of some blockages are, and then we use the Reiki to clear those out. But the being able to identify it and the visualization, like a client I did, as I guess it was a couple weeks ago, and the same week as the other client, that's what she said. For her, it was just like being able to visualize it and say it out loud. Like it's the awareness of it. The awareness is the big piece, right? Just becoming aware of it. And that's when we can start to work through it and work through to the other side of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the famous DeMello book, Awareness, Awareness, Awareness. Because you can't do anything, can you, until you know, you need to know, and then you can make a plan for something. Yeah, that's very cool. I like the link. I kind of was in energy medicine, then I moved away from it because I found it difficult to be from a scientific viewpoint. But now kind of coming back to it because there is a lot of interesting ways to look at it, and obviously the body is patterns, so of course it makes sense that we have these patterns in our body, and it's nice to have a way to process that. So I like your meditation. I think it's cool.
do you in our last session with a Reiki master, she had mentioned that she does a lot of remote healing. We talked to her during kind of the heart of COVID too. Do you do a lot of remote work, or do you do it in person, and do you find one or the other?
So my nutrition practice is 100% virtual. So all of my sessions are remote. They're all virtual. Yeah. And while I do have a brick and mortar studio, I'm still kind of slowly but surely integrating kind of what I do in my nutrition practice. Like right now, they're kind of two separate businesses. So I'm working now to kind of integrate the two. But right now, yeah, all of my sessions are virtual. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, isn't it? People want one or the other. When the holistic thing, you really, if you want to get at things.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Well, and people do get skeptical with the virtual Reiki. Like, well, how do you? But the thing is, like, energy has no bounds. Like, it's not restricted by time or space. So, as hard as that is for people to wrap their heads around, like, it really doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, and I kind of to round it all out. So we have work on the flexibility and core, proper balance of your minerals, Reiki, and understanding. I really loved. I do a lot of meditation, and I've kind of incorporated sort of like I have this concept when I meditate where I send out these little cells, which I call my little army, that go after areas in my body where I'm having pain, and I sort of like send out my white blood cell army to kind of go attack. But I've done that, but I love naming it and addressing it, because then you really can like do something about it. Like with the grapefruit, I figure I can
Totally,
peel it
yeah.
open and eat it.
Well, and it's funny you say that. That's kind of part of the process too, is as I have them visualize, whatever it looks like to get rid of it, if it's bringing it out or peel, whatever it is. So that is part of the process. It's, visualizing that being released. So yeah, you're totally right.
What's your secret? Like, what's your last kind of secret weapon? Sarah and I, like, Sarah's is light and sunlight, and I have just become obsessed with sleep. What is your kind of last secret weapon that you kind of tell your clients about?
I mean, I think it's what we just touched on. I think it's the emotional, energetic work. I think for so many, it's the piece that's never, and it's weird for people. And I have clients who it's just a whole new thing for them. Like they're not even really into meditation, much less me taking through this whole process of, naming their emotions and all that. So it is weird for people, but I find, for so long, I did just, right, I had the fitness here where I was just doing the Pilates, just doing the fitness. And then I had it where we add a little bit of nutrition. Okay, well, now I'm giving people meal plans, whatever. And it's, as I've gone layer and layer deeper and deeper and deeper into the work, I realized that really for me, it's the energetic, it's the emotional part. Like that's the missing piece. And it's the piece that, and at least in the Western world and the allopathic model, like it's just not, recognized as important or even valid in a lot of cases. And it's the piece that for me holds the key. Like, and again, I know I mentioned the book, The Body Keeps the Score, but it's such a good book, and it's such a good um, description of how that happens and how things get stored in the body, on that energetic level. So it's the emotions, all of that. It's the energetic and emotional pieces for me is huge.
And it's so accessible for everyone, isn't it? That's the piece that everyone can do. We're not, it's, you don't have to buy it. You don't have to save up for it. You don't need
It's true. It's true. Well, that's the thing that I think that's the reason why it's so often overlaid. It's not the sexy part we want to talk about, right? Like, tell me how to look good. Tell me how to look younger. Like, it's not the really exciting thing to talk about, but it's really the most simple part, right?
Well, like one thing about living in America is that if you don't buy it, then it's not worth anything. For us, it's like, and I've been like, I mean, I like to mess with my Instagram algorithm a little bit because I like to I write scripts on the side, so sometimes I'll look at what my search is and I'll go into like my feed, and my feed is crazy because of what I'm searching. But I do find that like if I click on anything related to buying something, I am massively targeted. I really find that this work is the most important work because if you're not understanding how all of this came about and how you're reacting to things, it does create, like you mentioned, some of your clients coming in saying, I'm having hormonal issues. Well, that's just that's a symptom, right? Like I have a rash. Well, the rash is like, no, like I had hives recently and the doctor was like, I have no idea what the hives are. Like it comes from probably 40 different things that created it. But I think kind of like to center it around that, I wanted to press on one thing you mentioned about the emotional codes. And because I feel like I read the Brene Brown book that came out last year. And I think what blew my mind about that book was just the fact that we like to name our emotions in like the camp of 5 versus like the 500 or 600 different ways to identify. Like anger is not just anger. Anger is fury. Anger is annoyance. So like, I'm wondering about the emotional codes when you're going through that process and naming it. Should we be expanding our vocabulary around our emotions too to properly name those emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I could go both ways on that because I do agree that we do kind of limit ourselves to, the emotions of the human experience. But I also think that at the same time, the nuances of it don't matter as much as just being able to identify it and then transmute it, right? And so I think that, yes, I do think that we should probably expand our vocabulary and expose ourselves to the full spectrum of human emotion. But I also don't want it to be a point of like frustration that causes even more like blocks to work through it, so I can kind of go both ways on that.
And it's probably hard enough for people to admit that they're angry or that they're sad, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing. It can be hard just to identify anything at all, right? Just to admit it. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do find WebMD and and searching up symptoms of whatever it is I'm dealing with, and it always is like the last thing on everything is stress. It's like, well, I mean, of course stress causes rash and stomach ache, but what is the stress coming from, right? And my poor mom, she's she's in her 70s and she's just been debilitated by this fear of dying, and she's a very healthy person, but emotionally she's been going through it, and she keeps saying, well, honey, it's the stress that's causing this. And I'm like, there's something else there. Like, you should dig into a little bit more on what's causing the stress, right? And um, that's a hard part because I think everyone likes to equate it to like, I'm stressed. Like, okay, well, we're all stressed.
Right, exactly. No, I find it's so true. And with the session that I did with a client a couple weeks ago, that was a big thing for her because she has this demanding job. But when we got down to the root of it, and that was what she kept saying, well, it's stress. Well, why are you stressed? And that's the same thing. Like there's a reason. And when we did this session, it ended up coming down to fear, right? Fear was the root of her stress. And so we had to kind of talk through where the fear was coming from. But there's always a deeper part at play here. Yeah, I agree with you. I think stress, and I don't know, and I say it all the time too because it's true. Everything is caused by stress, but it's such a like. I just feel like it's such a watered down way of like talking about it. Like yeah, duh, we're all stressed. Everybody's got a million things going on, but there's so much more to it than that.
Well, and it's funny because I look at the two of you, and both of you are entrepreneurs. Both of you have multiple jobs. You have clients, you have partners, you have people that rely on you. And neither of you look like you're stressed. I'm sure there's stuff going on inside, but I think it's all about how you can balance that out and actually manage all of it, where in some cases people just can't. Like, I think there are people that just get completely overwhelmed, and then all of a sudden stress becomes the thing. But it is about like structure and balance and all those things. So I do, like, there are times where I marvel at Sarah, where I'm like, I don't know how you do all this. You're amazing. And she keeps it all together. It looks amazing. But like at the same time, she's still getting her sunlight in the morning. She's getting her walks in. And I'm barely rolling out of bed and getting the microphone on so I can do this podcast. But I do think that it is about sort of kind of understanding it and then creating kind of, I imagine, new structured ways to kind of manage all of this stuff going on in your life. I mean, kids and family and all the other stuff.
Or just getting rid of your responsibilities, Russ. That's kind of
Yeah.
my method.
Yeah. No mortgage. Just, I live on the lam. That's what I'm going to go do. That's my goal. I'll only get a Sprinter van and just disappear. My wife and Teddy and I. Dogs will follow. I know. I have to take the dogs too. And then I got 3 kids in college. All right, fine. Everyone's going.
It's true though. It is. And I do, a lot of times, and I do a lot of nervous system work with my clients too, because that's what it comes down to. Because it's kind of one of those things where you can look at people and you have one person that has the exact same stressors as somebody else, but that one person is having the hardest time handling any of it, right? It's the amount of resilience that's in the body. And so the nervous system work is a huge piece. And again, I think the nervous system work really goes with the energetic work and being able to work through and clear things out. And that's the piece. Again, I know that sometimes it's hard. It's a hard thing for people to grasp because it's outside of their realm of like, it's not physical. We don't see emotions. We don't see energy, right? So, but it's, these energetic, what's energy is energy, or emotions are energy in motion, right? They're meant to move. They're meant to emote. They're meant to stay in motion. And when they're not is when they get stuck, and that's what causes stagnation and blockages in the body. And so I think when we're able to do like this energetic work, the emotional release, right? Like this is really what helps build the resiliency in the nervous system, because things can flow, energy can move and flow, and we can work through things. And it's just knowing, how to build that resiliency so that you can withstand stress. And because it's going to happen, like we're humans having a human experience here. So it's going to happen. It's just, being able to manage.
Yeah. It's I think it's a great way to end, because I think there's a couple of things that we've learned this season, which is and over time the quantifying yourself is important. I think knowing your numbers and being able to see it in data is really interesting, to see like all the things you just mentioned, but it's all showing up in my data. Okay, great. But then it's like understanding your body, and a lot of the people we've talked to this season are really like, well, I just know, like, I forgot a few guests ago was like, I just know when I'm going through this. Yeah, exactly. And he can do something about it. And I think it's just getting to that place where you know your body well enough to know that like, I'm overwhelmed and I need to reduce something off that list to do that. So awesome. Well, outside of 2 technical breakdowns, we did it. We got to the end today.
We did it. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your holistic approach. I think it's awesome. You're bringing all those things in. I'd highly recommend people look at your Instagram, because that's also quite inspiring. All the things that you're doing on there, and maybe just tell us your website.
Yes, you can visit me. It's hopefulandwholesome.com, or then of course, like Sarah said, on Instagram at the Hope Pedraza.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. It was really lovely to meet you, Hope, again.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. Yes.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Breaking the gray.